Hello and welcome to this video, guys. Today we're going to look into arrays in JavaScript. We are going to try out the different operations that you can have that is built in to the arrays. So let's get started. So the first thing you want to understand or do essentially is that an array is a special type of object that is used to store a collection of values. So for instance, we could say const fruits, and here we could just print our fruits. We could have apple, banana, and orange. Alright, so this is one way of generating an array, and the array now contains a couple of different values. So in order for us to access the values, there are a couple of ways we can access the values. For instance, we can say fruits at position 0. So keep in mind that arrays go from 0 to n. So 0, 1, 2. Alright, so saying fruits at 0, it will give me the value apple in this case. So this would be apple. And if you want to have 1, it would be banana, and 2, that would equal to orange. So in this way you can keep on adding stuff to the array. So one way of actually adding more fruits, in this case you would have to write fruits.push, and then we could push in a pair. In this case it would create a new array which would now hold the following values. So it would add the pair to the end of the array that we have. There's also ways of adding it to the beginning. You can add unshift. So adding unshift in this case would place the pair in the beginning of the array. There are actually a couple of things, a couple of use cases where you want to add it in the beginning of the array. And as you can see, when you hover around the functions, you see inserts new elements at the start of an array and returns the length of the array. So here's two different ways of adding things to the array. We can also start by removing. There are different ways of removing stuff from the array. We can remove from the end of the array. This can be done by writing fruits.pop, and in this case it would essentially remove the orange, given that we unshift the pair here. So pop will delete the last element, which in this case was orange, from the array. So if you have been working with Java or C#.NET, it works in a quite similar way. So another question that we usually get is, if I want to look through these fruits, how would I look through the fruits? So there's actually a couple of different ways you can look through the fruits. So you could have the more standard way of doing it, which is not something I would recommend. So you would just look through the lengths of the fruits, and here you would print the fruits. The one I would recommend really is a later one, which is the forEach method, that would allow you to look through any array and execute a function for each element. So in this case you would write fruits.forEach. Here we would have your item, or in this case our fruit, and we'll have a callback function here to do something with the result. So in this case we don't need to use the indexing here, so we'll have the fruit instead, in which we can do stuff with. So we can print it in this way. So fruit, this would be exactly the same thing that we're doing here. The second alternative is more of a preference you should strive for. Alright, so now that we have touched the actual fruits, let's go ahead and create something called numbers. So we'll go ahead and create a number array. So numbers, here we're going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So in this case, we can double the numbers, so we can call it const double numbers. So in this case, we're going to loop through each one of the items that we have, so each number, and we are going to essentially just double the number, so multiply the number by 2 in this case, and this would then return the array of 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. So in this way you can utilize the map function. So the map function, you look through each one of the items and return a new value that would be appearing instead of the current one. So in this case we're transforming the data into double numbers. So in order for us to find a couple of things within, we can say, for instance, we want to have all numbers larger than 3 in this case. So we could utilize the numbers dot filter. So in this case we will filter all of the numbers which is larger than 3. So in this case we would just return number larger than 3. So in this case it would return only 4 and 5, since 3 is not larger than 3. So from this array in this case. So in this way, we can utilize the filter function by filtering away things from the array and generating a new array with only things that evaluates to true. In this case, if it evaluates to true, it will be passed on to the new array. So there's a couple of different functions, or really a couple of different functions built into the array, which we can utilize. So we have more advanced ones, we have more simple ones. So let's imagine a real use case where we are going to search for something. We want to search within the array. So in this way, we can say exists in array. So we can say if value exists in array, we're going now to include. So if numbers includes the number 3, it should return true. In this case, because it finds the number 3 here. So you can utilize includes to find whether the item exists in the array or not. Then we have a couple of other built-in functions which maybe are not as widely used as the other ones. So we have, for instance, you can say is all positive numbers. So in this case, we will go through here and say if number is return number larger than 0. So what this will do in this case, it will look through each one of the numbers, come here, is this larger than 0? Yes. Is this larger than 0? Yes. Is this larger than 0? Yes. And continue all the way until it has reached the goal. So if all of the items evaluates to true, then so will this also evaluate to true. So in this case, it won't generate a new array. Instead, it will generate true or false based on what we have in our predicate. So in the statement that we have. So there's a similar thing. It has positive number. So in this case, we can also use something called sum. In this case, the sum the sum function will essentially just return true if we find one or more items in the array that fulfills the purpose. So it comes here, it says, is 1 greater than 0? Yes, it is. Then we have a true value because we say, if some of these values matches our statement, then we want this has positive number to become true. All right, we could continue with this all day and all night, but let's move away a bit from here. Let's go ahead and remove everything. And let's say we have in JS, you can utilize objects. So in the array, you can add the objects in the array as well. So we can say products, const products equals to, and usually you would have some specific information for the product. You would have quantity, you would have price. We can go ahead and create more than one product in this case. So in this case, we have 2 products within the array that we have. So imagine what we can do with the things we have now. So for instance, now we have we want to essentially look through the products to see which product has a price larger than 100 and then select that one. So products with price larger than 100. All right, so here is a shorthand of doing it. You don't need to actually add the brackets and then return. If you don't want to, you can have a shorthand by just returning the value in this way. So if this statement returns equal to, if price is greater than 100, it will return the item into the array. So in this case, the array would only consist of this item here. So now we can also map these things. Let's say we do not care really about other things. We only want a name of the products that we have. So if we would console, just to explain a bit, if we would console log this, it would return the object that we have here. So in this case, we could go ahead and yeah. So it would be an array of this object, and it would contain all of the items as well. But let's say we want to have the products names. Maybe we want a comma separated list where we actually print the names of the products. Then we could use something like this. So product names, and we would have to remap the data. So keep in mind, we can remap the data. So if we would remap the data, it would appear in an array with only the names in this case. So if you would like to have a comma separated list, you could utilize a function called join, which will join the array, and then the separator for joining the actual array. So in this case, the comma separated. So this would then return in a string which has product 1, comma product 2. So these are really use cases where you actually can use filter and map, and I think it might be a very common case where you use it. Then we also have more advanced things like the reduce one. I think this one is something many people are scared of using because they don't have no idea what it actually does. So we could break this down quite easily. So the reduce function will reduce the array into one value indent. So what we can say here is the first parameter here will be a previous value, next one will be the actual product we have, and then in this case we'll also have the starting value. So in our case here, we want to summarize the prices for the products that we have. So it would essentially mean that we need to multiply the quantity by the price for each one of the items. And instead of having to add a for loop where you loop through each one of the items and summarizing this to a variable, you could utilize the reduce function. So let's do it the other way, the way you usually do when you're a junior developer. So in that case, you would have products for each. So for each product that we have, we are going to have a sum. So let's sum equal to 0. And for each product, we would just do this. So there's a couple of things here. So keep in mind, we need to create a variable, and then we need to change the value of the variable for each row that we do. And this is something that's quite usually used for, I would say, more junior developers. So if you have worked with a lot with JS and you have really got together and started utilizing the reduce function, you would see the benefit of it. So in this case, it would be quite similar. So the way it works is that the previous value will always be attached to the next run that when we go through the array. So it will start with 0. So obviously we're starting with something quite similar to the sum. We start with 0. After we have the value 0, we come here. So the previous value is now 0, and we are on the first product. So we're adding 0 plus product price times quantity, which in this case is 0 plus 100 times 1. This means in the next run, we have previous value, which is 100. All right. So for the second run, it comes in here. So we have, when we are on the second item, it will be on the previous value would be 100, and then the product would be the second product in this case. So 100 plus 200 times 1. So in this case, that would be 400 plus 100, right? Or 100 really plus 400. So this would leave us with having 500. So if we would calculate this, this would be 100 and 400 because 200 times 2 is 400. So in total, it would be 500. So in this case, you could utilize the reduce function. So the reduce function is quite simple. As I mentioned, it is just one concept you really need to learn. Here is the default value, the starting value that we have. Previous is whatever is being returned from here, and the product is the current item in the array we are at. So for each, you would also start with the first item. Once that is done, you would go to the second item. Reduce works in the exact same way, except that you have the previous value from the last run. All right, so this is a reason I would suggest that you do use reduce. So first and foremost, it's one row less. You don't need to allocate a variable that you need to change all of the times. So you would have the variable set here. All right, so let's continue. So the arrays also come with a built-in function called such as sort and so on. We can slice items and so on. So let's go ahead and look into the actual sorting function that you can use here. So we could go with total dot sorry, not total, it should be products dot sort. The first one would be a value and the second one would be the b value. And here we could essentially return a, and then we could access the price minus b dot price. So this will sort it in ascending order, meaning that it will not be changed in this case. But if you want it to be sorted with the biggest value first, we could just put the b value here and the a value there. Then it would switch up the array so that the array now would look like this, because the price 200 is larger than 100 in this case. All right, so this is one way of actually using sort. We have gone through reduce, we have gone through forEach, find, filter, and so on. All right, thank you for watching, guys. All of the best. Bye.